Hi, welcome back to the new show. My name is Random Rob, and tonight I'm talking about the Chronicles of Riddick. So what kind of sequel would you make to Pitch Black? Action, sci-fi, survival adventure story? Well, the answer is, if you're director David Twohy, you go full-on biblical space opera. Makes sense when you consider that the character of Riddick was originally supposed to be from a race of space barbarians. So to audiences at the time who thought that Riddick's backstory as one of the last survivors of the planet Furia seemed retconned into Chronicles of Riddick, Twohy had actually been planning to make something of that backstory. There were some other things that were happening at the time that I think definitely had an influence on the direction this sequel took. One would be the success of the Lord of the Rings movies, concluded a year earlier with Return of the King. And the other thing that happened in 2003 was the beginning of the Second Gulf War. The influence of that can clearly be seen in the siege of Helion Prime in Chronicles. As Riddick is jumping over the rooftops of the buildings and the night sky is being lit up with anti-aircraft fire over this primarily Muslim city of New Mecca, it's hard not to be reminded of the images of the anti-aircraft fire in the night sky over Baghdad. Another thing that was shaping this franchise at this time was the multi-level marketing that film companies were doing. The Lord of the Rings and the Matrix series, for example, had video game tie-ins, some anime-influenced tie-ins. I think the other materials that came out of the Riddick movies, in particular the video games, were really good. I don't know anyone that wants to sit down and replay Enter the Matrix, but Escape from Butcher Bay is still probably one of the best first-person action tie-in games ever done in connection with a film franchise. In fact, I would also say, just personally, I don't think Starbreeze Studio ever made a bad first-person game. They made some of the best examples of that genre as a software company, including the original The Darkness, which came out on PS3 and still has never had a updated release for PC. Come on now. That was a great game. So one of the tie-ins to the release of Chronicles of Riddick was an anime done by Peter Chung, who was the director of Aeon Flux, called Riddick Dark Fury, which could also use a remaster and high-definition re-release. It's a really nice piece of animation. It fills in an important point about the backstory of Jack and why Riddick goes looking for her. The plot of Dark Fury is that the shuttle that Riddick, Imam, and Jack escape from the planet in Pitch Black in is captured by a mercenary ship called the Kubla Khan, captained by a woman named Antonia Chillingsworth, who collects famous bounties and turns them into living statues that she keeps in this elaborate gallery, and she plans to capture Riddick. Now, in the story, she is finally killed by Jack, and the implication is that this murder is going to set her off down a dark path, and is part of the reason Riddick wants to cut her loose and not be an influence on her. And by the time we get to Chronicles, we find out that she had eventually thrown in with mercenaries herself, then was sold into slavery, presumably escaped her enslavement or killed someone else, and ended up in the triple max slam of Crematoria, where Riddick is eventually reunited with her. Actress Rihanna Griffith, who played Jack in Pitch Black, was going to reprise the role for Chronicles, but was not able to get into physical shape for the part quick enough, according to IMDb. And the role went to Alexa Davalos, who some of you may know from her part as the doomed cash register in The Mist, and as the character of Juliana in Man in the High Castle. So at the start of Chronicles, Riddick is hiding out on the planet UV6. Partly so that Imam and Jack won't be harassed by people looking for him, partly to not further corrupt Jack, and also, I would assume, just because Riddick would prefer to be left alone. A bounty hunter named Toombs comes looking for him. Toombs' character is introduced in Dark Fury, so Riddick heads to Helion Prime to find out who put the bounty on his head. And although it's never stated specifically, he can assume that it is Arion, an envoy from the elemental race, who believes that Riddick will end up killing the Lord Marshal of the Necromongers and bringing balance to the universe. Yeah, echoes of Revenge of the Sith. And what's really interesting about this film in terms of Riddick's character is that he spends almost the entire story in one form of retreat or another. At the beginning, he's run away to planet UV6. When he's asked by Arion to help fight the Necromongers, he refuses and walks away. Riddick's natural state in this movie seems to be in retreat, unless someone messes with someone who he cares about. He seems quite ready to flee New Mecca during the Necromonger invasion until he bumps into Imam, trying to take his family to safety. And it's when Imam gets killed that Riddick goes and confronts the Necromongers at the main temple in the city, so that he can take revenge on the guard who killed Imam. He seems to have no interest in confronting or killing the Lord Marshal until Jack is kidnapped. Then he has a reason to confront the Lord Marshal. The climax of the film is one of the most baffling reversals, especially in terms of how it relates to the prophecy of Riddick helping to destroy the Necromongers, is that he becomes the leader of the Necromongers at the end. And it's not clear, even though he's become their leader, that he's going to have any effect on their campaign. Maybe that embrace of irony is really what this series and this character is about. Doing the unexpected, truly defying audience expectations. Probably the most interesting aspect of this film is just the Necromongers themselves. And there's much about them that's not explained that makes them interesting villains. For instance, the fact that they have a faith and a religion, but we never know who their god is. I have a feeling their gods may be the former Lord Marshals, which would explain who all these statues are. The Lord Marshal in the film is supposed to be the seventh. I also think that their dark energy tech could actually be based on dark matter, even though that was not really a popular concept yet when the film came out. I have a feeling that when the converts to the Necromongers receive the mark of the Necromonger in their neck, that maybe they're injecting some kind of implant. Maybe it's a dark matter implant, something that gives them heightened abilities, heightened resistance to pain. Another idea that's alluded to, though not spelled out implicitly, is that the Necromongers do not have children, from the fact that they commonly refer to other humans as breeders, sort of implying that the Necromongers are not. So they only increase their population through converting people. Most of the Necromonger art and statuary were inspired by the Italian sculptor Adolfo Wildt, who was famed for producing unusually smooth marble statues depicting scenes that were wrought with emotion. There's also a number of what I'd call strange mistakes in the film. The most glaring of them being, why didn't Lord Marshal kill Riddick as a baby? In Pitch Black, Riddick mentions how as a baby he was thrown in a dumpster with his birth cord wrapped around his neck. And then this turns into a major detail in Chronicles of Riddick, that this is how male Furian children were killed. Yet somehow Riddick was spared, somehow the Purifier was spared. So that's a little muddy. Then there's the scene where Imam says he knows that Jack was sent to a prison on a planet where it was so hot you couldn't stay on the surface, but he's not really sure where it is. But it turns out to be on Crematoria, which is apparently right next to the Helion system, which is another problem, because when Toombs and his mercs recapture Riddick, they are in the process of leaving Helion Prime, and Riddick says there's only 3 no-daylight slams in this system, but you'd never be able to reach 2 of them with the kind of ship this is, so that leaves only Crematoria. Except when they get to Crematoria, it says it's the Igneon system, but Riddick says it's this system, which would be Helion. Yeah, that doesn't make sense either. Another one is when Riddick is being interrogated by the quasi-deads. The Purifier is at the controls to the force field, which is keeping Riddick locked to the floor. And when the Lord Marshal says, "Kill the Riddick," the Purifier throws the switch, which releases Riddick from his containment so that he can murder all the guards who come at him, because that's what he does. I don't know, maybe the Purifier was trying to protect the quasi-deads from being hit by gunfire or violence or something, but if you watch the scene, it looks like he's deliberately releasing him so he can escape, but then there's no consequences. Nobody says, "Hey, Purifier, what the hell are you doing?" There's also the detail that when the Purifier kills himself on Crematoria by walking out onto the surface, it doesn't seem like there's a force field in front of the entrance to the shuttle bay. But it's supposed to be like 1,000 degrees or something on the surface, so what's protecting them in that scene? I don't know. Some trivia about the film. Apparently during the shoot, Vin Diesel, Carl Urban, Tandy Newton, and Judi Dench were hanging out together playing Dungeons and Dragons. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during that game. David Toohey insisted on getting Judi Dench to play Arion in the film and said he wouldn't cast the film until they made sure that they had her. Judi Dench said in her biography she had no idea what was going on in the film, but she enjoyed the shoot and really liked the sets. Vin Diesel was nominated for a Razzie for Worst Male Performer that year, but lost to George W. Bush for Fahrenheit 9/11. I guess the truth is Chronicles of Riddick is really kind of a mess. I don't know if it's because the production was rushed. I don't think it was. It was a fairly expensive film. It cost about $105 million, which, considering that Pitch Black only cost $25 million, is a hell of a budgetary expansion. I don't really know what happened. David Toohey is the kind of writer and director who's really good with small numbers of people, and I think maybe this was one film that got a little out of hand. The hype got a little out of hand. One thing I really appreciate about it, looking at it now, is how clear and clean the art design for it was, and how distinctive the art design of the film was. I don't mind so much that the CG at this point looks dated, because the art design was so distinct, it creates this comic book look. Sort of like, an issue of Heavy Metal that's consistent throughout the film. I was really impressed when they made the next sequel, Riddick, in 2013, that they kept that look intact. They did not try to update it, which I actually thought was a good choice for this series. So what do you think about Chronicles? Good movie? Bad movie? Train wreck? Beautiful train wreck? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you heard, make sure to press the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron of the new show. Alright, this is Random Rob. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.